But now there were encouraging reports that there was a safe overland route leading directly to Cathay. And Venetian merchants hoped to get there first. In 1271, Niccolo, Maffeo and Marco Polo set off from a house which once stood here. Their destination, the land of the great Khan. When they departed, the Venetians thought they might be away for 2 or 3 years. They were away for 17, and Marco Polo's book, written and illustrated on his eventual return, was closely studied by traders and medieval geographers. He described in detail his journey across Asia to Kublai's fabled city of Chengdu. There they were granted an audience with the great Khan and delivered letters of greeting from the Pope. The Polos were followed by other European merchants. To aid their journeys, Kublai built along the route 1,000 new post stations, or caravanserais. Each was provided with a hostelry, a granary, stables, and fresh pack animals. It was the start of a remarkable era in the history of trade. All along the great Khan's highways, hundreds of merchants traveled back and forth. For the first time, East traded with West, face to face. But the 1,000 caravanserais which Kublai built were as nothing compared to the great engineering projects he was initiating in China, like the Great Canal. It employed more than 3 million laborers and took more than 10 years to complete. The Great Canal was built to alleviate the persistent famines in northern China, where there was not enough arable land to support the population. But a canal that linked Hangzhou in the south with the great cities of the north would ensure imported supplies. For that, or any age, it was a remarkable feat of engineering. The canal was more than 150 miles long and had hundreds of locks, some of which are still there today. The canal was also cut deep enough to take ocean-going junks. Consequently, ships that had sailed the islands of Southeast Asia could navigate their way more than 100 miles inland. The canal reached towards a large inland port. It was all part of Kublai's great enterprise. At the end of the canal was a new city, bigger and more magnificent than the legendary Chengdu. This was the new capital of the new united China. Here, ships could deliver their cargo right to the Khan's door. "700 years later, there are still some echoes from Kublai's day. During the 1960s, archaeologists dug down to find large sections of the old streets and foundations. For a brief period, it was possible to get a glimpse of the remains of pavilions, temples, and statues. The scholars worked quickly to catalogue their discoveries before it was all covered up and built over. The only other physical legacy of the old capital were the great walls that once embraced it. Like a great many relics from the past, They were pulled down during the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s. The last of the great city gates were bulldozed to make way for a freeway. But with the aid of the archaeologists' records and modern computer animation, it's possible to recreate Kublai's greatest success. This was Dadu, the great middle capital, Kublai's ultimate gift to his subjects. It was the perfect Chinese city, built upon Confucian ideals. It was built within a perfect rectangle. The boundary walls ran for 24 miles. Each faced either exactly north, south, east, or west. Inside were two smaller compounds which contained the inner city and the imperial city. The inland harbor swept right up to the trading district. There, rows of warehouses were constructed along a grid of boulevards which designated separate districts for artisans, merchants, and foreigners. Parks and gardens dotted the landscape. But the heart of Dadu was the great imperial city. High officials and envoys entered the inner sanctum from the south, the traditional Chinese approach, through one of 12 city gates. From there, they traveled nearly 2 kilometers down the imperial way towards Kublai's palace. This road passed through the middle compound, which housed government departments and the homes of civil servants. Just beyond the Huzai Gate, they crossed a series of bridges and continued to the gate of the palace city. In the gate itself were housed more senior ministries, government records, and imperial galleries. Passing through here, the visitors entered the private world of the great Khan. The inner palace city consisted of 3 main halls or pavilions where Kublai gave audiences, conducted court ceremonies, and more private affairs. But for Kublai and his immediate family, these pavilions were never really home. A large area was reserved to the east and planted with grass from the Mongolian steppes, and here they pitched their traditional gurs. This was Kublai's real home, and where visiting Mongol princes preferred to stay, under felt roofs. Here traditional shaman ceremonies took place under the disapproving gaze of the Confucians. In the midst of his ideal city, this was Kublai's affirmation of his nomadic heritage. But the real image of Dadu was an awe-inspiring walled city, which projected immense wealth and imperial power. The source of all imperial power was the area of the 3 main pavilions, the Yud Hall, Gongchen Hall, and the greatest of them all, Daming Dian. This was built on a raised structure that placed it at the top of a girdle of carved marble stairs and balustrades decorated with dragons and phoenixes. The inside was even more elaborate. According to records, There were golden dragons, red mullion windows,